Good morning, friends. Today we are going to learn Victorian Criticism, Module 6, the particular term prescribed for you, Matthew Arnold's Touchstone method. First of all, I would like to give introduction about the Matthew Arnold. That is, Matthew Arnold is not only a critic but also a poet in the history of English literature. He introduces some methods of criticism in his The Study of Poetry work, which are written in 1865 and next part written in 1888. These are personal estimate, historical estimate, and above all Arnold Touchstone method. Personal estimate, historical estimate, and a real estimate, the terms introduced by him in his Touchstone method. Arnold is much influenced by Longnius, who advocated touchstone method or the comparative method. His touchstone method has been praised by many critics, though it has got some shortcomings. For these limitations, Arnold is much condemned. His choice of quotations of passages is quite praiseworthy. He chooses the quotations or lines which are great in diction and style, but only the lines from Milton. Critics find no important diction but only moral sentiment. So it is about Matthew Arnold's uh, first part of Touchstone method. As a metaphor, if we think about touchstone method is a touchstone, the word as a metaphor, it refers to any physical or intellectual measure by which the validity or merit of a concept can be tested. In study of poetry, he written or introduced the term touchstone method. A touchstone can be a short passage from recognized masters' works using in assessing the relative merit of poetry and literature. The standard or criteria, we can say that is measurement of the standard and intellectual measure. We can see that, understand that how it is used in poetry and literature by Matthew Arnold. This sense of the term was coined by Matthew Arnold in his essay The Study of Poetry, where he gives Hamlet's dying words to Horatio as an example of a touchstone. What is the method actually? Generally used to mean a standard for comparing or judging other things. It is used for measurement and verification, but the term conveys completely different meaning in the world of literature. Matthew Arnold tries a lot to invent an ideal standard or ideal literary works in the study of poetry. He invents a process by which the real worth or value of literary work can be judged. This process of judging a piece is called touchstone method. Here, Matthew Arnold tries to create the touchstone method, that is, put the passages and collect the passages from classical writers and compare those writers with the other writers and try to compare them. Fallacies of real estimate. What are the mistakes of real evaluation? Fallacies means mistakes and estimate means evaluation. Real evaluation. Arnold, while giving his touchstone method, makes reader aware about the fallacy in judgment. He is of the very he is of the view that historical fallacy and personal fallacy, that is historical mistake or the personal mistake, fallacy masks the real estimate of poetry while expressing his views of the historic, the personal, the real. He writes that in reading poetry, a sense for the best, the really excellent, and and of the strength and joy to be drawn from it should be present in our minds and should govern our estimate of what we read. So it is necessary to think about that particular work of art and should govern our estimate, our evaluation of what we read. If we read Dante, Homer, Chaucer, and we have to think about their fallacies, again think about really there are a real evaluation of that particular work of art or the part of literature. But this real estimate, the only true one, is liable to be superseded if we are not watchful by two other kinds of estimate, the historic estimate and the personal estimate, both of which are fallacious. See, here writer wants to present how those are the mistakes of the text and how we can judge them according to the particular readings of the essays, readings of the writers, and readings of the particular writer's work of art. Arnold praises Chaucer's excellent style and manner, but says that Chaucer cannot be called a classic since, unlike Homer, Virgil, and Shakespeare, his poetry does not have the high poetic seriousness which Aristotle regards as a mark of its superiority over the other arts. Here we can understand Arnold talks about high poetic seriousness. Every writer should have high poetic seriousness about the work of art or and he compares those writers and think about high poetic seriousness. According to Arnold, a writer is a creative man. The creativity of a writer is basically an abstract quality. If the writer is new, it becomes very difficult to justify him and his works. This difficulty causes as we are not aware of him. We may not understand by nature of his writings. As a result, a critic and a reader are always in confusion to find out the success and the failure of a new kind of writing. But Touchstone method solves this problem. It can judge a new writer and his writings very clearly. So, according to Arnold, here we can understand how the classical writers are taken for the judgment by Arnold, and he want to justify him and his work and what are the abstract qualities he finds in the other writers, that Dante, Chaucer, Homer, Virgil, and Shakespeare. If we think about the particular example here we have taken of the Chaucer, he never judged Chaucer's work from the point of view of high seriousness, high diction of that is high poetic seriousness. So we can understand the Arnold says about the Touchstone method. He compares Chaucer with Virgil, Shakespeare, Dante, and according to him, Chaucer is not having poetic diction or high poetic seriousness. The term particularly discusses personal estimate and historical estimation. That is, for the judgment of an literary art, Arnold propounds at first the personal estimate and historical evaluation. Personal estimate means that is the evaluation on personal level, and the historical estimation it means compare other writers with the particular writer and give the judgment or the give the particular opinion about that estimation or the evaluation. Both of them are not ideal standards. The personal estimate is not the ideal standard, or the historical estimation also not the ideal standard. They have defects and limitations. Arnold then propounds Touchstone method. That is, in this method, he has chosen some quotations of passages from great writers like Shakespeare, Dante, and Milton. He introduces a comparative method of justification of poetry. So, justification of poetry should be done with the comparative method. This does not mean that the subject matter of the touchstone pieces and that of the literary piece would be similar, but the poetic diction and high seriousness would be the same. Here, Matthew Arnold talks about the poetic diction and high seriousness should be compared and should be similar with each other. Then only the every poetic work is having or every literature is having the high poetic seriousness or the high poetic diction. So in this way, we can understand the particular fallacies or what is the real evolution of the poetry, how Matthew Arnold used the touchstone method, used the comparative method to compare the writers from the classical literature, and at the same time he want to suggest about the personal estimation also. So in this way we can understand what is the meaning of personal estimate and historical estimate. In historical estimate, he compares the work of art with each other and try to give justification about the both the work of arts in historical estimation. So in the next lecture we will see about the next part of Matthew Arnold's touchstone method. Till then, thank you and stay safe, stay home